The first thing I saw was my truck, flattened so bad the roof looked folded in by a giant hand, glass glittering all over the dirt driveway like somebody dumped a bucket of ice across my yard. For about 5 seconds, I honestly thought a tree had fallen on it until I saw the bulldozer tracks cutting straight across my property toward the fence line. Then I noticed the note taped to the windshield with bright blue painter's tape like they were trying to be polite about it. Unauthorized vehicle parked in active construction zone. I remember standing there in my work boots, sweaty from a 12-hour plumbing job, just staring at that sentence thinking, active construction zone? On my own land. My name's Nolan Grady. I'm 46 years old, born and raised outside of Round Rock, Texas, and until last summer, I'd spent most of my life believing that if you kept your head down, worked hard, and minded your own business, people would eventually give you the same respect back. Turns out that's not always how it works when your neighbors have an HOA budget bigger than your yearly income. See, my place sat like an old scar right in the middle of a brand new development called Silver Creek Estates. 42 luxury homes, all limestone fronts and black iron lanterns. The kind of neighborhood where every garage had a golf cart and every husband somehow looked like he sold commercial real estate. My little property had been there long before any of them. My dad bought those 2 acres in the 70s when there was nothing out there but cedar trees and cattle fences. After he passed, the land came to me. The house wasn't much to look at, old green siding curling in the heat, porch sagging a little on one side, but it was mine. Every board in that place carried a memory somewhere inside it. The people in Silver Creek hated looking at it. They never said it directly at first. Folks like that usually don't. They smile while they insult you. They'd wave during the day, then file complaints at night. One month, it was my work trailer being visible from the street. Next month, it was excessive mud accumulation. One woman named Heather actually came to my front door once and asked if I'd consider painting the house something more neutral for property harmony. Property harmony. I still laugh about that one. But the real problem wasn't the house. It was the water. A lot of people don't understand this unless they've lived out in Texas during a drought. But water rights out there can make grown men act crazier than oil money. Silver Creek Estates had this giant resort-style pool right behind my back fence. Infinity edge, blue tile imported from Italy, little gas fire bowls that lit up at night like Caesar's Palace. What most of the homeowners didn't know was that the entire system ran off my well. Same with their irrigation lines. When the developers built that subdivision, county permits got messy and drilling another commercial well would have cost them a fortune, so they made a deal with the previous owner of my property years before I inherited it. Monthly payment, shared access agreement, simple enough. I barely thought about it most days. Money hit my account every month, pool stayed full, everybody moved on with their lives. At least until the day they crushed my truck. I followed those bulldozer tracks straight to the south entrance where a crew was widening the private access road. And standing there in spotless sunglasses and a tucked-in polo shirt was Randall Pierce, president of the Silver Creek HOA. Randall always looked like he was campaigning for something. Perfect teeth, expensive watch, tan that probably came from a bottle. He saw me coming and sighed before I even opened my mouth. "Nolan," he said, real calm, like I was the inconvenience here. "You can't leave vehicles in marked work areas." I actually laughed because I thought maybe this had to be some misunderstanding. "Randall, that's my property line." He glanced over at the survey stakes for maybe half a second. "Construction company said the boundary was unclear. You drove a bulldozer over my damn truck." He shrugged. Actually shrugged. "Well, maybe next time don't park junk equipment where people are working." That word hit me harder than I expected. Junk. That truck was my father's before it was mine. I took one step toward him, and one of the contractors immediately stopped what he was doing, probably thinking we were about to fight right there in the dirt. But I didn't. Truth is, anger's expensive when you grow up broke. You learn early that the person who loses control first usually loses everything else right after. So I just nodded slowly and said, "All right." Randall smirked a little. "Also, code enforcement's been asking questions again. You may want to clean the place up." Then he walked off. And standing there listening to those machines tear into the edge of my land, smelling diesel fuel and hot asphalt in the Texas heat, something shifted in me a little. Not rage exactly, something colder than that. Because for the first time since those people moved in, I realized something Randall clearly hadn't. Silver Creek Estates wasn't the powerful side of this arrangement. I was. I didn't storm back into my house angry. Honestly, that's probably the part that scared Randall the most later on. I went home quiet. Real quiet. I remember my boots thudding across the old hardwood floors while the air conditioner rattled like it was fighting for its life, and I just stood in the kitchen staring out the window at that ridiculous pool glowing blue behind my fence. Kids splashing around, music playing, women in giant sun hats drinking wine like they were in some vacation commercial. Meanwhile, my truck sat out front looking like it had survived a war zone. Then I did something I hadn't done in years. I opened my dad's filing cabinet. That thing smelled like old paper, pipe tobacco, and dust baked by Texas summers. My father kept everything. Receipts from the 80s, handwritten notes, county permits. If a piece of paper ever entered his hands, chances were he stuffed it into that cabinet. Took me maybe 20 minutes before I found the agreement folded inside a manila folder labeled Water Access, Silver Creek Development. And there it was. One paragraph. One tiny little paragraph buried halfway down page 4. Service may be terminated upon breach of good faith or property interference by either party. I read it 3 times. Then I leaned back in my chair and laughed so hard I scared my dog awake. Because suddenly the whole thing became simple. These people thought they owned the neighborhood because they had money. But money doesn't matter much when the water stops flowing in July. The next morning I called my attorney, an old friend named Denise Harper who'd handled land disputes all over Williamson County for 20 years. Denise had one of those voices that always sounded halfway between amused and exhausted. So let me get this straight, she said after I explained everything. The HOA destroyed your vehicle while trespassing on property tied to a private utilities agreement? Pretty much. There was silence for a second. Then she started laughing. Not polite laughing either. Full-on cackling. Oh, honey, she said, they are unbelievably screwed. By noon she drafted the termination notice. Professional, clean, no emotional language, just facts. Breach of good faith. Unauthorized land use. Property damage. Service suspension effective immediately. I printed 2 copies. One for my records. One for Randall. Now here's the thing people online always get wrong about revenge stories. They think the satisfying part is yelling, or threats, or dramatic speeches. It's not. The satisfying part is when somebody realizes they've mistaken kindness for weakness, and it dawns on them way too late. I slid the envelope into Randall's mailbox around 3 in the afternoon. Didn't knock. Didn't text. Just drove back home, walked over to the pump shed behind my barn, and shut off the main transfer line feeding Silver Creek Estates. Clunk. That sound echoed louder than I expected. Then I killed the breaker powering the auxiliary pump system and snapped a heavy industrial lock through the valve wheel. Done. By 4 o'clock their pool filters stopped running. I know that because my backyard suddenly got quiet. No humming pumps. No waterfall feature. No circulation system. Just still water sitting under the Texas sun. That first evening nobody noticed much. A few residents wandered around confused. Maintenance crews checked equipment panels, but most people assumed it was temporary. Randall definitely did. Around 6:30, he drove past my house in his black Escalade, slowed down long enough to glare at me sitting on my porch, then sped off again. Didn't say a word. Day 2 was different. Texas heat in August doesn't play around. Pool levels started dropping fast from evaporation, and their irrigation systems stopped overnight. By lunchtime, neighborhood Facebook groups were already melting down. I know because my buddy Luis kept sending me screenshots while we were working a plumbing job across town. Anyone know why the pool water looks cloudy? Why are sprinklers not running? HOA not responding. Then came my favorite comment from some lady named Cheryl. Honestly unacceptable considering what we pay in dues. I laughed so hard coffee came out my nose. But the real fun started on day 3. That morning I stepped outside with my coffee and caught the smell before I even saw the water. Anybody who's worked around stagnant systems knows that smell instantly. Warm algae, chlorine imbalance, wet decay. Sweet and rotten at the same time. The edges of the pool had already started turning green. Mosquitoes hovered over the surface in thick little swarms, and dead leaves clumped against the corners because circulation had completely stopped. Kids weren't allowed near it anymore. Residents stood around taking pictures like tourists at a crime scene. Then Randall finally came over. He marched up my driveway around noon, wearing sunglasses and anger like armor. You shut the water off. I took a sip of coffee. Yep. You can't do that. I already did. You're under contract. No, I said calmly. I was under contract. That rattled him a little. You think this is funny? No. Crushing my truck was funny to you. This is business. He stepped closer then, lowering his voice. You're making a mistake, Nolan. That line almost made me smile, because powerful people always say that right before they realize they've lost control. I don't think I am. You have any idea how much trouble this is going to cause? I looked past him toward the pool behind the fence where the water had gone from blue to murky green in less than 72 hours. Looks like you're starting to figure it out. His jaw tightened hard enough I thought his teeth might crack. You redneck son of a bitch, he muttered. And there it was. The mask slipping. Not neighbor to neighbor. Not man to man. That's how he really saw me the whole time. Just some dirty working-class idiot sitting on valuable land he didn't deserve. Funny thing is, once people show you who they really are, decisions become easy. By day for the county got involved. Turns out stagnant luxury pools become public health hazards real quick in Texas heat. Williamson County inspectors showed up after multiple complaints about mosquitoes and odor. They tested the water, took one look at the algae blooms spreading across the shallow end, and cited the HOA for unsafe conditions and mosquito breeding risks. West Nile concerns. Potential fines. Immediate corrective action required. Only problem was, they couldn't drain the pool, because they had no replacement water source. That was the moment panic truly hit Silver Creek Estates. You could feel it in the air. Landscapers stopped showing up because irrigation systems were dead. Lawns started yellowing under triple-digit heat. HOA emails got more desperate every day. Residents began arguing openly during board meetings. One homeowner apparently screamed at Randall in the clubhouse parking lot, while another threatened legal action over declining property values. And through all of it, I just kept going to work every morning like normal. Fixing pipes. Replacing water heaters. Living my life. But every evening I'd come home, sit on my porch with sweet tea, and watch that perfect neighborhood slowly come apart at the seams because one man they looked down on decided he was done being pushed around. Then on the evening of day 5, 4 black SUVs rolled into my driveway, and I knew Randall was finally ready to negotiate. I counted 4 SUVs pulling up my driveway that evening. All black, all spotless, tires crunching over the gravel like they were arriving for some political scandal instead of a meeting with a plumber in a worn-out porch chair. Randall stepped out first, but he looked different now. Smaller somehow. Amazing what 5 days without water can do to a man's confidence. 3 other board members followed him up the walkway. One older woman named Diane who used to pretend not to see me at neighborhood meetings. Another guy I recognized from a 4th of July party who once complained my dog barked too much, and some nervous younger attorney-looking man carrying a leather folder against his chest like a shield. Nobody smiled. I stayed seated. That part mattered to me more than I expected. I wanted them standing while I sat. Petty maybe, but after years of being treated like the embarrassment next door, I'd earned at least that much. Randall cleared his throat. We need to resolve this. I nodded toward the empty chair across from me. Then sit down. Nobody moved at first. Finally Diane sat. Then the others followed. The sun was dropping behind the cedar trees, and for a second nobody talked. You could actually hear mosquitoes buzzing over their precious swamp pool behind the fence. Then Randall slid into business mode. The board is prepared to discuss compensation for your truck. Good, I said, because you owe me for a lot more than that. I reached beside the chair and handed him a manila envelope. Inside was everything. Truck damage estimate, property survey photos, trespassing documentation, legal notices, county violation copies, and on top of the stack, a brand new water contract. Randall skimmed the first page and immediately frowned. $2,800 a month. You were paying $800. That was before you destroyed my vehicle. Diane spoke up carefully. Mr. Grady, this increase is extreme. I shrugged. So is bulldozing somebody's truck. The younger attorney started flipping pages faster and faster, probably realizing this wasn't some emotional bluff. I'd spent the last 2 nights building that contract with Denise line by line. Then Randall hit the payment section. His face changed instantly. 12 months prepaid. Non-refundable. That's $33,600. Math checks out. He looked up at me like he honestly couldn't believe I was talking to him this way. Guys like Randall spend their whole lives assuming blue-collar people are intimidated by titles and expensive watches. The problem is, once you stop caring about impressing rich people, they lose most of their power. You're extorting us. No, I said calmly. I'm offering terms. He leaned forward. You shut down an entire neighborhood. I leaned forward too. You crushed my father's truck and called it junk. That one landed hard. For the first time all week, Randall didn't have some slick comeback ready. Just silence. I could see it in his eyes then. He finally understood this wasn't really about the money anymore. It was about humiliation, respect, boundaries. All the little ways people with power convince themselves they're allowed to step on somebody smaller because life's easier that way. The younger attorney cleared his throat carefully. There's also the issue of liability exposure from the county citations. Diane looked over at him nervously. How bad? He hesitated. That's never a good sign from a lawyer. 3 homeowners are already discussing legal action against the board for negligence regarding community amenities and property value damage. Randall snapped his head toward him. You said that was unlikely. I said it was manageable before the health department got involved. Then came the best part. The insurance carrier is also questioning coverage due to the initial property damage incident involving Mr. Grady's vehicle. I actually almost felt bad for Randall right then. Almost. Because you could physically watch the realization hit him. This whole thing had started because he wanted to bully a working-class neighbor in front of a construction crew. Probably thought it'd make him look tough, decisive, important. Instead, he'd triggered a legal and financial disaster that was now spreading through the entire neighborhood like gasoline fire. Nobody talked for a long moment. Finally, I broke the silence. You've got 24 hours before the county escalates enforcement. After that, I'm done negotiating. Randall stared at me with pure hatred. You're enjoying this. I thought about that honestly before answering. Then I said, no, I'm enjoying finally being heard. That shut him up better than yelling ever could. They left 10 minutes later. No threats. No speeches. Just 4 exhausted people walking back toward their expensive SUVs while mosquitoes hovered around them in thick little clouds. About 18 hours later, Denise called me while I was replacing a busted garbage disposal in Georgetown. They signed. I wiped my hands on a rag. All of it. All of it. Turns out desperation moves pretty fast when property values are involved. The wire transfer hit my account before noon. $33,600 prepaid. $9,700 for damages and legal claims. 5-year renewal option with quarterly review terms. Full inspection rights near my property line. Every signature notarized. By sunset that same day, I walked back out to the pump shed behind my barn carrying the same key I'd used to lock the valve 6 days earlier. Funny thing, I stood there for a minute before turning it. Because I realized something in that quiet little moment. The whole neighborhood had changed. Not physically. The houses were still there. The pool was still green. Rich people were still rich. But the illusion was gone now. They knew I wasn't powerless, and I knew it too. Then I unlocked the valve. The pipes groaned alive underneath the ground, and somewhere beyond the fence I heard pumps kick back on one by one. Water rushing. Machines humming. Life returning. Cost them another $8,000 to clean the algae damage out of that pool, by the way. Apparently luxury filtration systems don't enjoy becoming mosquito habitats. 2 weeks later, Randall resigned from the HOA board. Nobody said officially why, but word travels fast in communities like that. Especially after 3 separate homeowners threatened lawsuits and somebody leaked board emails online. Last I heard, him and his wife quietly listed their house and moved west toward Lake Travis. The new HOA president came by a month later carrying a fruit basket and a handshake that actually felt sincere. He said, I think we got off on the wrong foot. I told him, yeah, your old president drove over it. Even he laughed at that one. These days things are quieter around Silver Creek Estates. People wave more. Complaints stopped showing up. Funny how respect suddenly appears once people realize they can't push you around for free. Still, every now and then I catch somebody in that neighborhood looking at me differently when I drive by in my new truck. Not angry, careful. And maybe that's the part one still think about sometimes late at night sitting out on that porch. Did I go too far? Maybe. Some folks would say shutting off water to the whole neighborhood crossed a line. Others think Randall got exactly what he deserved. Truth is, I still don't fully know myself. But I do know this. People love looking down on the guy in muddy boots until they realize he's standing next to the valve that keeps their entire world running. So tell me what you think. Was Nolan justified for what he did, or did revenge get the better of him? And if somebody destroyed your property, would you have handled it differently or done exactly the same thing? Drop your thoughts in the comments, because honestly, I've seen people argue both sides of this story for months.